All right, what's good, YouTube? This is Boxingwave, and we got another fight breakdown. This is going to be my first breakdown of four big fights coming up this weekend. And today I could hopefully knock out the main event and the cold main event. This is actually the cold main event. This is Devin Haney against Brian Norman Jr. It's going to be on the undercard of the David Benavidez Anthony Yard fight, and it's an amazing card. I think the four main fights on the pay per view is I think they're all championship fights. It's going to be on the Zone pay per view this Saturday, and I will be here live. I'm not sure if I'm going to be here for the entire preliminary card, but I should be here for all four championship fights. All right. Let me start out with this one because I feel like this is the only real, true 50-50 fight. All right. This is the fight. I've made content on this fight talking about this. Everybody's back and forth, man. I've heard arguments and stuff. My decision has changed. This is literally the first fight I bring up anytime I talk boxing with anyone. All right, where are you going with this? I've heard Norman by knockout. I heard Haney by decision. I even hear Haney is gonna drop him, knock him out. I've even heard that. So I've heard a whole lot of different opinions on this one, and I'm not gonna lie to you. I've definitely changed my opinion several times on this specific fight. I do believe that this is a true 50-50, and Devin Haney is having his first real fight, no catch weight or anything, at 147. So he is officially moved up to the welterweight division, and he's now fighting for his in his third division. All right, he's undisputed down at 135. He fought for a title at 140. He was there real quick, and then he has also now moved up to the welterweight division. All right, so let's get started. Where do we begin with this? All right, first of all, Brian Norman Jr. definitely have grown on me. It's just the interviews that he's done leading up to this fight have been excellent. Right, 24 years old from Atlanta. Uh, for some reason, I always think he's from Florida because he sounds just like Roy Jones to me. Seriously, the accent is completely identical. You told me if I wasn't watching a video of him and you told me that this was Roy Jones giving an interview, I would believe him. Like he sounds just like Roy Jones to me. But undefeated young fighter, 24 years old, 28 wins with 22 knockouts, no defeats, no draws. I believe he's like 5 now. I know he's like maybe like an inch or so shorter than Devin Haney. Obviously he's a career welterweight, so he's naturally the bigger guy here. I don't know if he will on fight night, but he's naturally the bigger guy here. He's a career welterweight. Inch reach pretty much the same. You know, Devin Haney might have a slight by inch or so reach advantage, but it's not by much. All right. And like I said, he's undefeated. He hasn't fought the best fighters. You know, we really wanted that Jerron Boots in his fight. We didn't get it. You know, some back and forth at first. There was an offer made. They thought they were underpaid. I'm talking about Team Norman. And then that fight didn't happen. And then there was a point where, you know, Jerron Ennis was supposed to fight him or maybe consider fighting him after a fight and unifying him with him. And it just never happened. Jerron Ennis moved up. You know, I made content on that back then. We're not going to get into all of that. All right. But he's an undefeated fighter. Don't have any huge names yet on his resume. But he's had some great recent performances, especially knockout of the year against Jin Sasaki recently, right? And then you have Devin Haney. You know, obviously, he's undefeated. He's 27 years old now. 32 wins with 15 knockouts, no losses, no draws. Now we know he had a loss against Ryan Garcia, which was overturned to a no contest. He took a lot of damage in that fight, right? We all know about this. This happened last year. Took a lot of damage. Was knocked down about 3-4 times in that fight. Ryan Garcia popped later, so they overturned it. Plus, there was a weight advantage for Ryan in that fight as he had went over the agreed upon weight for that fight on purpose. Strategically, he did. And then, you know, he came back. Devin Haney came back and fought Jose Ramirez, a former champion at 140, former unified champion at 140 that also wanted to move up. And I believe they fought like at a catch weight at like 143. I probably should have fact check that, but I believe it was like 143. Yeah, it was in between 140 and 147. And that was I got a lot to say about that fight because I think that fight there with Jose Ramirez is the most recent Devin Haney fight. It was a Times Squared card, the same card that Ryan Garcia lost to Rolly Romero, and it just wasn't the greatest performance. And that's the win that Devin Haney is coming off of. Okay, now Brian Norman Jr. Let's start with him. Like I said, career welterweight, key fights. Quentin Randall at the time was a good step up. Quentin Randall was an undefeated fighter at the time. Good, solid, bigger welterweight with some good boxing skills. And he passed the test that night. Brian Norman defeated him, went to decision. It was a pretty rough fight. Wasn't the best performance, but he did what he had to do. Okay, then he had a fight with Boca Chica where he did get dropped in the first round by a right cross, right? Which means a lot to me. You know what I mean? I think that knockdown, there was a no contest in the third round because I think there was some kind of bad cuts. I think there was a head clash in that fight. And Brian Norman was really struggling in those 3 rounds. But then he went on to beat Giovanni Santillan, which I think was his best win to date. All right, because Santillan was coming off the stoppage win against Alexa Rocha. And at that time, Brian Norman had fights where a lot of the hype really came behind the sparring that we heard about him and Terrence Crawford. There was sparring stories that he allegedly gave Crawford a business or at least gave him a tough sparring session. A lot of hype always comes behind that. Same with Errol Spence. Like he's supposed to drop, supposedly he dropped Adrian Broner, right? And supposedly he gave Floyd Mayweather a black eye. And then I heard that Brian Norman Jr. knocked out Terrence Crawford. And that's when a lot of people were making content on him because he didn't really have a buzz before that. But then, he's come a long way now. He beat Giovanni Santillan. And yeah, he pretty much he's been elevated to the WBO champ. He had a couple more fights, one against Derek Cuellar. He's been pretty busy. He's fought, as I see here, he's fought twice in 2025, twice in 2024. So he's at least getting 2 fights in a year. But the Santillan fight is what really was really impressive, right? Now he had a fight with Derek Cuevas, was a 3-round stoppage, but it was another fight where you could see little holes in this game. Like I saw Cuevas caught him with a couple good hooks and a couple good shots in the earlier round that buzzed him a little bit. But it was again at the end of the day he stopped him in 3 rounds, and then he had the Jin Sasaki fight, which was a domination because Jin was just coming straight in, getting clobbered on his way in, getting countered with ease. At the end of the day, when we really look at all of these fighters, and I've gone back at least since maybe a little bit before that, but I've gone back since the Randall fight. And I've made myself watch these fights, revisit these fights that I've seen already to try to make a call here. And it's very, very difficult because even though Devin Haney is moving up, in this situation, he's a smaller guy. Even though he's moved up, he's been in there with much, much better talent up to this point. And we know that, resume and stuff doesn't always mean everything. We've seen a lot of guys that had better resumes, more experience lose this year. It is what it is. It happened. So we can't base everything off that. I mean, look what Fabio Wardley's doing. Anthony Yard is on this card. And even though he had a lot less experience than Kovalev and Beterbiev, yeah, he lost those fights. He was stopped. But look at the amount of work he put in those fights. You know what I mean? He gave Kovalev hell. He gave a Beterbiev a great fight. These are guys that didn't have much amateur background and stuff like that. So, and at the end of the day, fighters step up on their biggest fights. A lot of fighters do. A lot of fighters look decent in these little fights they have in between, but when they have the big fight, that's when they step up and we see things that we don't normally see. So in a boxing skill set debate, when we're talking about the eye test, when we talk about who they fought in the past, Brian Norman doesn't look like he's more skilled than Devin Haney. On the resume, the record, he doesn't look like he's been in there with the fighters to prepare him for someone like a Devin Haney who's been in there with all these kind of people, the Lomachenko, the Ryan Garcias of the world, even Jose Ramirez, you know what I mean, and his experience and what he's done as a champion at 140 and people he fought. He's been in there with so many different people up to this point, and the Regis Pro grade, you know what I mean. It's just when you see the names pop out, it looks good, but it doesn't always mean everything. And plus, timing is always everything. And when it comes to timing, it might be in favor of Brian Norman Jr. because he's fresh, he's undefeated, he's powerful, way more powerful than Devin Haney. And Devin Haney's the guy that accomplished all this stuff. And I'll speak more on this shortly, but he's accomplished all these things. But at the end of the day, just last year, we seen you getting knocked around by, Ryan Garcia. He showed a lot of heart, and he finished the fight, but we took a lot of damage. And the Jose Ramirez fight didn't really tell us the full story or where he's at right now. All right, but Brian Norman Jr., stylistically, very, very. I would describe him as a boxer puncher. He will knock you out cold, but he has some boxing skills. You know what I mean? I don't think he's particularly great at anything. He does. He's a good feinting. He's good at feinting, slipping, and countering, and again, like he has a good jab. He got a decent inside game. Like I think he's good across the board, but I don't think there's anything that stands out about him. I don't think he has the greatest reflexes. I don't think he has the greatest defense. I don't think he has the greatest jab. I think there's things there that Devin Haney, to me, definitely does better. But the equalizer is here that he's never been knocked around 4 times and taken the damage, and he's a huge puncher, and Devin Haney, it doesn't have the greatest chin. So I think those are the key strengths there when it comes to the two of them. All right. When we go into Devin Haney, obviously I talked a lot about his accomplishments and stuff like that, who he's fought at lightweight all the way up into welterweight, but Devin Haney is coming off a catchweight fight win against Jose Ramirez, who's past it, former unified champion, but he's past it, right? So to me, it was sort of a tune-up, but it was a tough tune-up, because Jose Ramirez is past it, but he is a former champion, you know what I mean? And I think it was a proper fight coming off of the Ryan Garcia loss, no contest. It was a proper fight. And Devin Haney underperformed, in my opinion. He fought very cautious, too cautious, almost scared. Right? I never seen Devin Haney fight like that before. The only complaint, and I know people like to diss him because he's not a knockout artist. Okay, it's been a while. I think what's his name? Abdullayev and Antonio Moran. That was back in 2019. Those were the last 2 stoppages that we got from Devin Haney. Antonio Moran was probably his best career knockout, at least that I've ever seen. Right? It's been a long time. It's been 6 years. He was a lightweight at the time, and those weren't even the best fighters he fought. Right? So it's been a long time for Devin Haney. But outside of the Yuriorkis Gamboa fight, I don't think Devin Haney's a boring fight. I just think that when he's boxing and he's winning, he doesn't have the power to really just end someone. You know what I mean? He can just continue boxing. I'm not even saying that he doesn't go into a different gear. I mean, he puts his punches together well. He throws combinations. He tries to knock some of these guys out. I just don't think he's a puncher. I think the same thing about Shakur Stevenson. I think he tries to knock some of these guys out, but he just can't. But in this fight with Jose Ramirez, it was like excessive movement, and again, Devin Haney could move well, but I've never seen him move like that. I never seen him just not take any risks. Like when he got hurt against Jose Linares in that fight, which I thought was a dangerous fight at the time because I know Linares might have been a little bit past his prime, but I knew he had a good power punch, and I know he had very fast hands. And I remember when Devin got caught in that fight, and he had a little issue walking back to his corner, and then he fought safe for the remainder of the fight. but it was very towards the end of the fight anyway. So it took the last couple rounds off because he was up so much on the cards anyway. But this Ramirez fight was just the worst. And you know what? It doesn't let me know where he's at mentally. I think ability wise, he's still very good. I think ability wise, I think he's better than Brian Norman. You know, I mean, he has a phenomenal jab. Now, even though he still does the little bow and arrow thing, yeah, we know. I think he has a phenomenal jab. I think he has better defense. You know, those pullbacks, those hitting and pulling back, and the reflexes overall. Like he's better at seeing the punches like coming. You know what I mean? Even though he couldn't, he didn't do a great job against Ryan with the left hook, outside of the first round. And then if you skip all the way to the round where Ryan actually hurt him and dropped him, he was doing pretty well. Outside of the first round, I think like the next 5, 6 rounds, he was clearly being Ryan. You know what I mean? Um, so with that being said, I just think that Devin Haney, uh, it's he moves better. I think he has faster hands. I think he has more. I think he has, uh, a little better with the angles. I think I like his lead uppercut. Like I think he has more of an arsenal of punches. I just think he lacks power, and he probably lacks durability if we're comparing the two. I think I don't know. I don't know how durable Brian really is because Brian has been dropped. I seen Brian get buzzed by Cuevas in the first round, and these guys are not at the high level yet. You know what I mean? So I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns, but when it comes to Devin Haney, I don't know where he's at today. What I will say is that the Devin Haney that I've watched for years now, prior to this fight with Jose Ramirez, prior to that fight, I think he clears Brian Norman Jr. I think he clears Brian Norman Jr. Outside of the puncher's chance, based on what I've seen up to now, not what we see Saturday. Because Brian Norman could pull out a bag of tricks that I'd never seen before on this Saturday. That can happen. But based on what we've seen, I've seen Devin look poor in his very last fight. I think that Devin, that fight, in his very last fight, where to me, he fought scared, he fought overly cautious. I think Brian Norman beats that version of Devin Haney. Is that version of Devin Haney going to show up again? Or is he going to take a little risk? I think he needs to find, in order for Devin to win this fight, I think he needs to find a median of what we saw in his last fight and what we seen in the Ryan Garcia fight and the previous fights to that. That's where we need Devin Haney. We need Devin at the very least. I do think he needs to be cautious against Brian because Brian has a phenomenal left hook. We're talking left hook. That's his best punch in my opinion. As I'm doing film study, the Jin Sasaki knockout was a left hook. I think he has. I think it was a left hook. I think. Oh damn, was it a left hook? I think it was a left hook. But I think he has a great left hook. Let me just say, from film study out there, I think he has a good left hook, and I don't want to base everything off that because at the end of the day, a lot of fighters that Devin Haney had fought had good hooks. You know what I mean? He's fought other guys. He's been caught with hooks. Even when he fought Jose Ramirez, I seen him still doing some of the same mistakes. With his jab and stuff. Sometimes he shoots the jab and he don't keep that phone up, high enough, or sometimes when he pulls back, he's not pulling back early enough, or sometimes he looked very fearful of what's coming back. It's one thing to expect and be defensive against what's coming back, but it looked like he was so concerned about what was coming back that it was taken away from his offense. If that Devin Haney shows up again, he loses his fight. So I'm not going to hold you guys all day. I think really it's based on you and what you think is going to happen. There's no way to really know what's going to happen. Devin Haney last fight loses. Gets stopped, maybe, right? I think that version of Devin Haney gets stopped. Too cautious. Brian is probably working his ass off on his cutting off the ring. I'm assuming that he's going to be better like mobility is going to be better. I'm assuming that. I don't know. All right, but I think Devin, even if at some point, if Devin is just going to move and overly move, I don't think he's winning the fight. I can see Devin even losing on points for the excessive movement and not being aggressive enough. All right, this is a Riyadh season card. I don't think Turkey's out here giving guys wins for excessively moving and just being overly cautious. I don't think that's what we're getting right now. So you also got to factor that in for you gamblers out there. You got to understand that Brian Norman can win on points, not just by the knockout. Devin Haney, I'm not expecting a knockout. I'm not. If he knocks out Brian Norman Jr., that'll be crazy. That would be crazy. I'm expecting a points decision if Devin Haney is to win this fight. With that being said, Devin Haney to me is better than Brian Norman Jr. before that last fight. If Devin Haney fights that way again, he loses. If Devin Haney opens up a little bit and be cautious, move, boom, boom. Like, I remember him walking Ryan Garcia down. You know what I mean? And even though Devin couldn't avoid the left foot, we got to remember Ryan Garcia has mad experience fighting Devin Haney. You know, outside of him being juiced up, outside of him having a weight advantage over him, purposely missing weight. Outside of those two key things, you got to remember they fought a bunch of times in amateurs. You know what I mean? Ryan had a lot of confidence early in that fight. But there was a long period of fight before Devin Haney got hurt where he was walking down Ryan down and, even hurting him with a couple shots. You know what I mean? So I don't want to base everything solely off that fight. Overall, I think the talent goes to Devin Haney. But the timing right now might be Brian Norman Jr.'s time because he's the bigger guy, he's the bigger puncher, and I think he can change this fight around at any given moment. Even if Devin is winning on points with his jab, controlling him with his jab, boom, that nice 1-2, duck and roll underneath it, move around him a little bit. If he continues in doing that, like he's done with other guys like Cambosos and stuff like that, then I think he can win. But he almost has to be perfect because one big left hook or one big shot can put him on the ground or put him out. Very tough fight to call. It's on you. For me, I'm going to go with Devin Haney on points. I think that Devin Haney, to me, I'm basing the chances of him losing off just one fight. Just one bad fight. And I know that that bad fight was a bad fight. But I'm basing it off that one fight. All right. Does he have PTSD? We don't know. It's a gamble. He might have PTSD. If we see another fight of him fighting like that this weekend, then he might be damaged goods. He might be. I won't know until Saturday. And when it comes to Brian Norman, if he has more tricks up his sleeve and he can do more than what we've seen so far, we won't know until Saturday at the highest level. We got to see this Saturday. Right? Based on what I've seen in his opponents. Yeah, the knockout with Sasaki and Santion and, Cuevas, those were cool. But that ain't, don't fight any of those guys. You know what I mean? I see Cuevas. Yeah, I think Cuevas and Randall is good for film study. But Devin Haney's better than those guys. You know what I mean? So it's up to you. I got Devin Haney. It's 50-50. Should be I'm hoping it's a good fight. All right. It's the fight that I'm excited for the most. All right. Both fighters, by the way, both fighters get crazy amount of credit if they win. Brian Norman, even though Devin Haney's moving up, Devin Haney is a great test for you, even though he's moving up because of all the experience he has. And when it comes to Devin Haney, again, moving up to another new division, fighting an undefeated, dangerous puncher like Brian Norman Jr. If he wins that, get mad credit. All right. I love the back and forth between the dads too. I just think this. I just hope the fight don't disappoint. I hope it's just a Good fight. And if it does go to points, I hope the judges do the right thing for the right winner. Anyway, I'm out of here. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys on Saturday. Look out for the other breakdowns. Peace.